wasn't supposed to happen again. We were told the problem was solved. We were told the hardware was fixed. But at 5:42 a.m. on February 2nd, 2026, the sensors inside the mobile launcher screamed a warning that NASA engineers have been dreading for 3 years. See this thermal signature on your screen. That isn't exhaust, that is liquid hydrogen. While the mainstream media is running headlines about a successful test and a minor slip to March 2026, the raw data tells a terrifyingly different story. This was a confirmation of a fatal design flaw that has plagued the space launch system since day one. And buried in the noise of this hydrogen leak is a much darker piece of intel, a leaked internal timeline that suggests the American return to the moon Artemis III has quietly been pushed back to a date that changes everything. September 2028. The authorities want you to believe we are weeks away from launch. But if you look at the flow rates and the 8-inch quick disconnect lines, you realize the math doesn't add up. We aren't going back to the moon in 2026. We aren't going in 2027. The schedule just broke. And the reason why is hiding in a valve that NASA has had 3 years to fix, but somehow can't. Hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe. It is a ghost. It can slip through metal seals that are watertight and airtight. To keep it contained, you need perfect thermal isolation. During the Artemis I campaign in 2022, this same leak appeared. It caused 3 rollbacks. It delayed the mission by 6 months. NASA's solution? They replaced the seals. They modified the loading procedures. They spent millions of dollars on kindler, gentler cryogenic loading software to reduce thermal shock. And yet, here we are. February 2026. NASA Associate Administrator Amit Kshatriya recently stated that this is the first time this particular machine has borne witness to cryogens, and that how it wants to leak is something they have to characterize. Listen to that language, how it wants to leak. They are treating the rocket like a living, unpredictable organism. But rockets aren't biology, they are engineering. If you cannot predict the leak, you do not understand the machine. The official narrative is that the leak on February 2nd was stabilized within acceptable limits. They claim they managed to reach the terminal count, the last 10 minutes before simulated liftoff. But here is the pivot. At the terminal count, the leak rate spiked. The ground launch sequencer, the automated brain that controls the rocket in the final seconds, triggered an automatic cutoff. The computer didn't trust the fix. Humans can override safety limits. We can waive launch criteria. We can accept the risk. But the code doesn't lie. The code saw a concentration of hydrogen gas near the base of the vehicle that was high enough to turn the launch pad into a crater. This isn't a new problem. It's the same problem. For 3 years, the engineers at the vehicle assembly building have been fighting a ghost, and the ghost is winning. So what does this mean for the timeline? Officially, NASA says Artemis' second time for the mission to send 4 astronauts around the moon is targeting March 2026. They say the delay is just to review the data. But let's look at the documents they aren't showing you. A recent Government Accountability Office, GAO, report warned that the Exploration Ground Systems (EGS) program has limited time to address potential issues. Translated from bureaucrat speak, they have zero margin. Every day the SLS sits on pad 39B, it is exposed to the corrosive salt air of the Florida coast. Every time they load and unload cryogenic fuel, the seals expand and contract, degrading their lifespan. And now, the unfixable reality. If they launch in March with a known leak issue, they are gambling with the lives of Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen. But if they roll back to the VAB for repairs, the delay pushes us into the summer storm season. Then comes the hurricane season. Suddenly, 2026 is gone. And this is where the 2028 figure comes from. While everyone is staring at the SLS rocket in Florida, a leaked internal timeline from SpaceX regarding the Starship human landing system, the vehicle supposed to actually land on the moon for Artemis III, shows a readiness date of September 2028. NASA's official chart says 2026. The contractor's internal chart says 2028. That is a 2-year gap. That is a chasm of missing time. The agency is trying to bridge that gap with optimism. But physics doesn't care about optimism. Physics cares about the fact that the quick disconnect on the 8-inch hydrogen line failed to seal at 423 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, we need to stop looking at the rocket and start looking at the plumbing. The media calls it a leak. That implies a hole. That implies a puncture. But what happened on pad 39B is far more sinister than a hole. It is a fundamental failure of geometry. The component you are looking at is the 8-inch liquid hydrogen quick disconnect. It is the lifeline of the rocket. It feeds ultra-cold propellant into the core stage at thousands of gallons per minute. When the tank is full, this plate has to separate from the rocket in milliseconds at liftoff. It is a mechanical marvel. It is also a mechanical failure. According to NASA's own safety protocols, specifically Engineering Spec 44001, the maximum allowable leakage of hydrogen gas in the confined area of the umbilical is 4% concentration. Anything higher at a single spark from a static discharge creates an explosion that rivals a tactical nuke. On February 2nd, the sensors inside the umbilical cavity read concentrations fluctuating above that safety limit. The engineers tried to torque the connection. They sent commands to physically tighten the clamps while the rocket was fueled. Think about that. They were tightening the bolts on a bomb while it was ticking. This document was released in 2023. The Office of Inspector General, the internal police of NASA warned them. They explicitly stated that the liquid hydrogen system presented a technical risk. They told NASA that the thermal shock of loading fuel at 423 degrees Fahrenheit was deforming the seals. NASA had 3 years to redesign the quick disconnect. They had 3 years to change the seal material. Instead, they changed the procedure. They decided to fill the tank slower. They decided to lower the pressure. They put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And now, in 2026, the Band-Aid just ripped off. And this brings us to the money. You need to understand why they won't just scrap the quick disconnect and build a better one. Money. Every time they touch this rocket, it costs the American taxpayer a fortune. The latest audit puts the price tag of a single SLS launch at $4.1 billion. That is not for the program. That is for one rocket, one use, one throwaway event. If they admit the quick disconnect is flawed, they have to redesign the tail service masts on the mobile launcher. That is a billion-dollar renovation. That is a 2-year delay. So they stay silent. When journalists asked for the specific leak rates from the February 2nd test, NASA Public Affairs declined to provide the raw numbers. They issued a summary. They gave us the interpretation, not the data. When asked about the Char Loss on the Orion Heat Shield, the only thing standing between the astronauts and a 5,000-degree re-entry burn, NASA refused to release the full engineering report. They classified the root cause analysis as proprietary and ITAR restricted. Since when is the safety failure of a civilian spacecraft a state secret? They are hiding the severity of the erosion. They found that the avcoat material didn't just ablate evenly. It cracked. It spalled. It created pockets where superheated plasma could drill into the capsule. They know that if they admit the heat shield needs a redesign, Artemis II is dead. The entire program stops. So they are choosing to fly a compromised system. They are choosing acceptable risk over necessary safety. Why the rush? Why the desperation to launch a leaking rocket with a cracked heat shield? Because they aren't racing against time. They are racing against Beijing. This is the escalation. While NASA struggles to seal a valve in Florida, the China National Space Administration, CNSA, is executing a flawless robotic campaign. The Chang'e 6 mission successfully returned samples from the far side of the moon. Chang'e 7 and 8 are already hardware-rich, scheduled to land at the lunar South Pole to hunt for water ice. The United States has a Law-the-Wolf amendment that prevents us from cooperating with China in space. That means there is no sharing. There is no treaty. Whoever gets to the Shackleton crater first, whoever sets up the drilling rigs on the ridges of eternal light, owns the water, and water is rocket fuel. Hydrogen and oxygen. If China establishes a permanent presence at the South Pole before Artemis III lands, they control the refueling station of the future. They control the high ground. NASA knows this. The White House knows this. That is why the timeline is being manipulated. The GAO report GAO 24106-256 stated bluntly that the human landing system SpaceX's Starship and the Axiom SpaceX Starship and the Axiom spacesuits will not be ready until 2027 at the earliest. If you add the heat shield delays and the hydrogen leaks, 2028 is the optimistic scenario, but China is targeting 2030 for boots on the ground. If Artemis slips to 2028 and China accelerates, the margin for error is 0. We are one valve failure away from coming in second place in a 2-horse race. We are staring at the end of an era. The uncomfortable truth isn't about a hydrogen leak. It isn't about a heat shield. It is about the fragility of American competence. For 50 years, we have lived off the glory of Apollo. We told ourselves that we could go back whenever we wanted. We told ourselves that space was ours. But the data on your screen, the leaks, the cracks, the years of delays, tells a different story. It tells the story of a system that has forgotten how to build the future. If the Artemis program fails, if NASA is forced to cancel the SLS because they simply cannot fix the hydrogen plumbing, there is no plan B. There is no backup rocket capable of sending Orion to the moon tomorrow. Starship is still in development. The commercial market is focused on low Earth orbit. If Artemis dies, the American human spaceflight program is effectively grounded beyond the ISS. We become a nation of passengers hitching rides to a station we built, watching from the window as other nations plant their flags on the peaks we used to claim. The geopolitical implications are terrifying. Space is not just about exploration, it is about soft power. It is about showing the world that your system of government, your economy, and your engineering are superior. If China lands a taikonaut on the lunar South Pole in 2030, and the United States is still stuck in Florida trying to fix a leaky valve, the message to the world is clear. The torch has passed. NASA is now trapped in a Kobayashi Maru, a no-win scenario. They are facing two terrifying options, and they have to choose one. Option 1, the gamble. They push the schedule. They waive the safety limits on the hydrogen leak. They fly the damaged heat shield and trust the new trajectory. They launch in 2026. If they succeed, they save the program. They beat the clock. But if they fail, if that hydrogen spark happens at T-4 seconds, if the heat shield fails at Mach 32, we lose the crew. And we don't just lose 4 heroes. We lose the political will to ever leave Earth again. A disaster on Artemis II ends the moon program for another 50 years. Option 2, the surrender. They admit the rocket is flawed. They roll back. They spend 3 years redesigning the quick disconnect and the heat shield. They delay Artemis III to 2029 or 2030. In doing so, they almost certainly hand the victory to China. They choose safety, but they sacrifice supremacy. This is the decision sitting on the desk of the NASA administrator right now. Do you risk the lives of the astronauts to save the reputation of the nation? Or do you sacrifice the nation's standing to save the lives of the astronauts? There is no third option. The hardware is what it is. The leak is real. The clock is running. The Space Launch System was sold to Congress as the safe option. It used legacy shuttle parts. It used proven engines. It was supposed to be easy. But complexity is the enemy of safety. And by trying to build a Frankenstein monster of old parts, we have created a machine that is too expensive to fly and too dangerous to launch. The 2028 delay isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It is an admission that the safe option has failed. Now, I want to turn this over to you. I want you to imagine you are the commander of Artemis II. You have seen the internal reports. You know about the 4% hydrogen leak. You know about the cracked heat shield. You know that the computer tried to abort the launch and the engineers overrode it. But you also know that if you don't go, the program might die. So, here is the question for the comments. If NASA clears the rocket for launch next month, despite the leaks, and offers you a seat, do you strap in? Do you trust the official narrative that the risk is acceptable? Or do you trust the receipts that say this machine is a ticking time bomb? Type GAO if you take the risk. Type abort if you think we need to ground the fleet. I'll be down in the comments debating the engineering with you.